okay?
You got me. You got it?
That was my shirt.
Oh, thank you very much. Good evening and welcome to the Ordinary Council meeting, Monday the 11th of July 2022. Item 1, meeting opening. 1.1, attendance. Are there any apologies, Mr Benny?
Mayor and Councillors, there's a leave of absence that's been granted for Councillor Angela Long, and there is an apology from Councillor Lloyd Trong.
Thank you, Mr Benny. Item 1.2, acknowledgement of traditional owners of this land. Council acknowledges the traditional owners and custodians of this land, the Bunurong people, and we pay our respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, while recognising their deep and continuing connections to climate, culture and country. We also pay our respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and their elders and acknowledge their journey. Item 1.3, offering of prayer, reflection or affirmation. As part of Council's commitment to recognising the cultural and spiritual diversity of our community, the prayer, reflection or affirmation this evening will be offered by Sheikh Uzay Zubair Ali from the Albanian Saki Mosque, a member of the Greater Dandenong Interfaith Network. Please stand.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May the peace, mercy and blessings of Almighty be on all of us. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Let us pray to God, the most compassionate and most merciful, ever present, never unaware, infinitely able. Guide us to pure convictions that then inspire us to the best version of ourselves. We pray for selflessness, not selfishness, unity, not division. We pray for values of understanding and tolerance that unite us all. Praise be to God, nurturer of all the worlds, the compassionate, the merciful. You alone do we worship, and you alone do we seek help. Guide us to the straight path, the path of those whom you have favored. O nurturer, forgive our living and our deceased, those who are with us today and those who are absent. Guide us on the straight path, our young and our old. Restore health to our infirm and preserve our community elders. Let the spirit of peace and stability reign on our beautiful land, Australia and its people. Amen.
Move on to item 1.4, confirmation of minutes of previous meeting of Council held on the 27th of June 2022.
Happy to move it.
Moved by Councillor Garrard, second by Deputy Mayor Foster. Are there any questions?
Stephen Foster wasn't here last.
Yeah, I apologise, Deputy Mayor Foster, you weren't at the council meeting. So moved by Councillor Garrard, second by Councillor Milkovich. Are there any questions? Is there any opposition? If there is no opposition, I declare the motion carried. Item 2, Officers' Reports, Part 1, 2.1, Documents for Sealing, 2.1.1, Documents for Sealing. Moved by Councillor Tan, second by Councillor Lim. Are there any questions? Is there any opposition? If there is no opposition, I declare the motion carried. Item 2.2, Documents for Tabling, 2.2.1, Petitions and Joint Letters. Moved by Councillor Garrard, second by Councillor Tan. Are there any questions? Is there any opposition? If there is no opposition, I declare the motion carried. Item 2.3, Statutory Planning Applications, 2.3.1, Town Planning Application number 2 and 4, Luxford Court, Springvale, Planning Application number PLN 21/0663. Moved by Councillor O'Reilly, second by Councillor Milkovich. Are there any questions? Is there any opposition?
Got a question,
Question
Mayor?
by Councillor Tan.
Just regarding to the 8 dwellings, could the officer please advise how many bedroom for each dwelling? It's not listed on the report. Thanks.
Mr. Thorley.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll just bring up that information. Sorry, there's a mixture of 2 and 3 bedroom apartments within the development. I'm just trying to get the specific numbers for you. Mr. Mayor, I'll get back to you if I could.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Thorley. Question, is that or in opposition?
It's opposition, sorry.
Did you want that question taken on notice, Councillor Tan, or did you want to wait for the answer? I'll take that on notice. Okay, thank you. Are there any other further questions? Is there any opposition? Councillor Lim in opposition. Councillor O'Reilly as the first mover.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I won't go through all the details of the planning application, Mayor, but it certainly meets planning guidelines. I will point out that it's located in an excellent position in central Springvale. It's adjacent to Erickson Gardens, open space near Springvale Police Station, a hop, skip and a jump away from the bus stops along Springvale Road, which are a premium bus route, and also a couple of minutes walk away from Woolworths supermarket. So be happy to hear the nature of the arguments against. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor O'Reilly. Second, Councillor Milkovich.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In support of the proposed plans is the plan, or the dwellings are located on some 1,184 square metres of land with the big central driveway down the middle. Now, I've looked at these plans in quite a detail and looked at the officer's reports, and it actually complies with every single statute of planning scheme that's required for that particular area. More so, it's actually located within walking distance to Springvale Community Hub, Springvale Library. It is walking distance to Springvale Boulevard, or the renewed Springvale Boulevard. Now, train station is only about, I think, 250, 300 metres up the road. Public transports are plenty. There's absolutely nothing that I can see in this application. If anything, it's probably one of the better ones that I've seen lately that I would go against. So I'm in support of this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Milkovich. Councillor Lim in opposition.
Thank you, Mayor. For me, I look at the plan of that court. It's very small court, and normally we have only 6 dwelling. Now we build for 2 dwelling to make it become 8 dwellings. To me, it look like each only 1,184 square meter, and to subdivide to 8 dwellings, it seems to be very, very, crowded. It for me is overdevelopment and also lose all the neighborhood characters. And secondly, to me, it's going to affect the traffic as well. It means the 8 dwelling, they say that 1 to 2 car. The whole 8 dwelling is about provide only 10 car park. It means each dwelling is not going to have only 1 or 2 cars. Normally, it's up to 3 or 4 cars, sometimes some family. Therefore, it's going to be very congested. And where do those cars going to park? Even on the street, I Google on the street, it's just full of cars on that street. Hardly find any room for. If we build that one, it's very, very congested, very noisy, and also have traffic problem, especially waste collection as well. And that's what, to me, I object that development. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lim. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Garrard.
Thank you, Mayor. Excuse my voice. I would like to reinforce what Councillor Lim has said. Excuse me. That this is an example of overdevelopment and not in keeping with neighbourhood character. We could have up to 30 residents living in these 8 units. We have only 10 car parks. There will be excessive congestion in the surrounding streets, excessive noise. It's an excessive impost on this area. It's out of character for this area. There will be overshadowing, overlooking, noise impacts and vegetation loss. And I object to this proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Garrard. Are there any further speakers? Councillor Dark.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd rise to echo the sentiment of Councillor Garrard and Councillor Lim with this planning application. It is most definitely an overdevelopment, in my opinion, of the site in terms of the site coverage and what is there. It is a general residential zone area. It's not a residential growth zone. It's not in a strategic area. It's not an area which we overly particularly want very, very, very dense development. As Councillor Garrard stated as well, and I know Councillor Lim touched on as well, it would be approximately 30 people living in these townhouses, very, very tight, with limited amount of car parking, and having a look and seeing what the street is like and seeing how narrow it is a significant cause for concern and the potential safety implications that can have for people who are living in these developments, and that is why I will not be supporting this application.
Thank you, Councillor Dark. Mr Thorley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll just confirm, Councillor Tan, that it's 6 2-bedroom units and 2 3-bedroom units.
Thank you for confirming that, Mr Thorley. Any further speakers? If there's no further speakers, a right to reply, Councillor O'Reilly.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd address what has been brought up as a negative or objections to the application. So firstly, parking. The application meets all the parking requirements, and we all know that Council cannot demand any additional parking beyond the minimum guidelines of the Victorian Government. So if this Council wanted them to double the car parking, we can't do it. And I mean, we make these decisions every meeting, and we know that we can't do that. So that addresses most of the concerns brought up by car parking, is that we can't do anything in a planning sense on car parking. Secondly, neighbourhood character. I walk past this area quite frequently, and it is becoming more dense, Mayor, as it should, as Councillor Milkovich and myself have pointed out. It is adjacent to a large open space area. Centrelink, Springvale Library, Woolworths, Springvale Police Station, in case you'd like to drop by. All these things, it's smack bang in the middle of. So as far as, access to services, not having to use your car, this is absolutely, if someone was working from home, they'd hardly have to go within a 1 kilometre radius of their home to get so much of what we need on a day-to-day basis. So planning planning requirements tick, location tick, and I can't see, I've listened to the objections, I can't see the validity of them in a planning sense to oppose this application. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor O'Reilly. All councillors in favour of the motion, please raise your hand. Councillor O'Reilly, Deputy Mayor Foster, Councillor Milkovich. All those against? Councillor Garrard, Councillor Meady, Councillor Lim, Councillor Dark, Councillor Formoso. The motion is lost. Councillor Lim, would you like to move an alternate recommendation? Motion, sorry.
Yep. Okay, to me, does this application be, forward primarily, you refuse that because on the ground of congestion, that this probably has too many unit building and also too much traffic in. Yep. Therefore, I refuse for that.
So we have a motion to refuse by Councillor Lim, second by Councillor Dark. Are there any questions? Is there any opposition? Opposition, Councillor O'Reilly. Councillor Lim.
Sorry. Yep.
Why you speak to refusing?
Yep, because I refuse on the grounds of overdevelopment and also cause congestion in that area and also affect the traffic as well, and especially remove all the waste as well. The truck have difficulty in remove all the wastage as well. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Lim. Councillor Dark.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, I think that we've said what the piece has already been said regarding this development. It is significant overdevelopment of the site. Whilst I understand where their sentiment has been put, at the end of the day, it is a very, very dense development. The street is very, very narrow, and it would cause potentially serious concerns for safety in the area.
Thank you, Councillor Dark. In opposition, Councillor O'Reilly.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not just going to go over what I've said before, but safety concerns is what any dense development poses safety concerns. Is that what this council's arguing for? So that density equals lack of safety. This is located in, like I said, a highly well-lit area around gardens and so on. So, like the arguments being put forward here, Mayor, I think they'll take one look at VCAT and make their decision fairly rapidly, because this council has to decide planning applications on planning grounds and not conjecture. So for that reason, Mayor, I think this council wants to say, talks about saving money in a budget sense, and then makes decisions that are just going to be a lawyer's picnic at VCAT, then we've got to start looking at the bigger picture. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor O'Reilly. Any further speakers?
Yes, Mr Mayor, thank you.
Councillor Milkovich.
In support of Councillor O'Reilly, since we're running under the assumptions that this is going to happen or that's going to happen, there's going to be 30 residents living there, 25 cars parked on a very narrow street, let's run under the assumption that all new dwellings are going to be rented out to newly arrived migrants that haven't got a single vehicle between them, and they choose that spot to actually walk to Springvale Central so they can get their groceries from the local Woolworths, and they can walk to Springvale Library to learn English language, and so on and so forth. So I'd like to urge Council one more time to think that assumptions is not what should run this place, and whether we like it or not, we need to make sure that we understand where this is taking us. Decisions like these have been approved, or applications like these have been approved in the past in far worse spots because they fit with Compliance Directorate. I'm not sure what the problem is now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Milkovich. Councillor Garrard.
So I want to speak in favour of the refusal. Yep. So I just want to respond to Councillor Milkovich's point. It is likely, when you have 32 people, that you will have excess cars in that development. There is nothing about this development that will restrict the number of cars. We know that Springvale is a congested area. We know it will put excess pressure on services. We may find the police station busier. That's not particularly a good thing. We do not take the position that we allow every planning decision because VCAT may or may not approve or not. So we make decisions in the best interests of the community, and clearly the community and the objectors to this proposal do not want this. It is not good for the city. It is over congestion, and we object to it. We do not make decisions based on what VCAT will decide.
Thank you, Councillor Garrett. Are there any further speakers? Right to reply, Councillor Lim.
Yep. Thank you, Mayor. To me, like Councillor Mirkovic said, that probably mainly migrant rent that sort of property. To my point of view, unlikely any migrant can afford to rent all these double dwelling. And secondly, normally, if they have a job, that likely they're going to have a car. Like Councillor O'Reilly said, that they just walking distance. It's not mean that because they need a car for sure to travel. Not always you find a job nearby your property. It's not like that. Therefore, to me, I still think that it's going to be very congested and also very hard for the the traffic as well. Because like Councillor Rhonda Garrett said, that is because Springvale already very congested anyway. Therefore, from my point of view, should be objected that one because of the affects the neighbourhood character. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lim. All councillors in favour of the alternate motion, please raise your hand. Councillor Garrard, Councillor Meti, Councillor Lim, Councillor Dark. All those against the alternate motion, please raise your hand. Councillor O'Reilly, Deputy Mayor Foster, Councillor Milkovich, and Councillor Tan. Somebody counted? How many was it? Two. Councillor Formosa has abstained, I think. I didn't see her hand raised. Oh, Councillor Formosa? Because Councillor Formosa did vote against it at the earlier one, so that would be... So I think it's 4-4, so... Was it 4-4? 1, 2, 3, 4-4. So I declare the alternate motion carried on the Mayor's casting vote. You agree with that? 4-4 carried on casting vote? Well, we've already voted now, so... We have voted on it. Okay. We'll move on to the next item. Yep, thank you. Item 2.3.2, Town Planning Application number 44, Knockholds Crescent, Noble Park Planning Application number PLN 21/0674. Do we have a mover, councillors?
I'll move it, Mayor.
Moved by Councillor Dark. Do we have a seconder, councillors?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Second by Councillor Milkovich. Are there any questions, councillors?
Some question, Mayor. I just need to
Councillor
know how many rooms for each dwelling, thanks.
Mr. Thorley?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll take that on notice and quickly get a reply.
Thank you, Mr. Thorley. Are there any further questions? Is there any opposition? If there is no opposition, I declare the motion carried. Item 3, question time public. Mr. Benny.
Councillors, Mayor and Councillors, the first question this evening is from Branko Tomic of Dandenong North. The question is presented as an application for a permit or disability zone, and I would have to say that it is already under consideration by the engineering department. But the question that I can read is, I, Branko Tomic of address, which I won't state, am writing to the council to consider my application for a permit for a disability zone for on-street parking next to my house. The application then goes on to cite various personal reasons, which I don't think are appropriate to read in this forum, but will be considered carefully by the officers. I'm begging the council to consider assigning a permit zone or disabled zone for the parking next to my house so that I am at least able to use it without the difficulties of dealing with other people's cars. This is becoming an increasingly difficult task for me to access the parking area next to my gates, and I request that the Council consider this in light of my physical disabilities and age. Mr Van Boxtel for this.
Mr Van Boxtel.
Through the Mayor. Thank you, Branko, for your question. Council does not typically reserve public on-street parking spaces for private usage, particularly in residential areas. Should any residents have specific parking needs, they are encouraged to cater for these needs within their own property. I'm aware that your request has been received recently via other channels and can advise that Council's transport engineers are assessing the matter and will respond shortly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Van Boxtel. Mr Benny.
The next question is from Matthew Kerwin of Noble Park. What are the locations planned for LATM projects this year, in particular in the long-needed LATM projects for pedestrian safety on Railway Parade near Yarraman Railway Station going to progress, at least in terms of planning and community consultation? Mr Van Boxtel.
Mr Van Boxtel.
Through the Mayor. Thank you, Matthew, for your question. The priority projects for Council's local area traffic management program are detailed on our website under the road safety section. Council has applied for federal black spot funding for the road safety treatments at several locations in the 2022-23 financial year, including Railway Parade in Noble Park. Whether the funding ends up being through the federal program, if we're successful with our application, or through Council's own program, we expect consultation with residents in the Railway Parade area to occur within the next 6 to 12 months, and reducing vehicle speeds around the area of pedestrian activity at Yarraman Station will be our key focus. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Van Boxtel. Mr Benny.
Next question is also from Matthew Kerwin of Noble Park. Can a review of effective street light luminosity along Cyril Grove, Noble Park, please be conducted, particularly at the Railway Parade end? A number of women have commented to me how dark it is walking home from the railway station at night, particularly at the Railway Parade end, which makes them feel unsafe. Mr Van Boxtel.
Mr Van Boxtel.
Through the Mayor again. Thank you, Matthew, for your question. We plan to undertake a luminosity investigation this month to assess the concerns raised in Cyril Grove. If the luminosity levels are determined to be below standard, possible solutions will be identified which may require additional or alternative lighting fixtures to be installed. Potentially impacted residents will then be notified and provided an opportunity to comment on the proposed solution over a 28-day period in accordance with Council's public engagement policy. Where supported, quotes will then be sought from United Energy and subject to that being successful, we would then proceed with the installation of those improvements. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Van Boxtel. Mr Benny.
The next question is also from Matthew Kerwin of Noble Park. I learned on the weekend about the Berry Street School in Noble Park. It sounds like a well-run school that is much needed, but how is a school allowed to be built in a factory in the industrial zone? What was the planning process that allowed that? Mr Thorley can respond.
Mr Thorley.
Through you, Mr Mayor. A planning permit was issued for the Education Centre at 11 Tower Court, Noble Park, in 2003. This school has been operating for a significant number of years and provides a specialised education to disadvantaged youth who may have dropped out of the mainstream school system to prepare them for entry into the workforce. So it's a really great school and provides great service to our community. In accordance with the planning scheme, a school use is a use that can be considered within the industrial zone in a similar way to churches, play centres and other non-industrial uses. In this instance, it was determined that the benefits of this school provided in supporting vulnerable and disadvantaged youth justified approving this school in this location. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Thorley. Mr Benny.
The next question is from Maria Sampi of Dandenong North. A few years ago, the Jan Wilson Centre purchased in the kitchen a new stove and double oven for cooking. There was a problem with rain seeping through the range hood and going through to the oven at the time. I've recently looked at the stove oven and it is full of rust inside the oven. I believe that when you turn the oven on, the smell of the rust will penetrate the food. an OH&S issue. Can Council please look at replacing a new one, or have someone look at removing all the rust from inside both ovens? Mr Van Boxtel.
Mr Van Boxtel.
Through the Mayor, thank you, Maria, for your question. We will organise a condition assessment of the oven and take further action as required. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Van Boxtel. Mr Benny.
The final question is from Martin Parsons of Springvale. I'm really disappointed that the council failed their community when an 80-year-old oak tree at 5 Ross Street, Springvale, was cut down. I've been trying for years to get this tree classed as a tree of significance for years. I've rung the council multiple times but been told nothing can be done, or they don't know which department I should contact. When the permits for the development were first put in, I even had a petition to try and save this tree, as it has a trunk larger than 2.5 metres in circumference, the largest oak tree I have ever seen, and I work in the horticulture industry in heritage areas like Hawthorn, etc. I believe that there should be restrictions on the size of any tree to be cut down. We are in a world where we need to think more about what we already have than development. It does not matter how many trees they plant on this property, it will never replace what we have lost as far as greenery and a place for fauna. If this tree has been illegally cut down, I would like action taken and the plans reviewed if possible. I cannot express my disappointment in this matter, as I feel council did not care for the greenery of Springvale, and when I rang, no one could tell me which avenue to follow to help protect what should have already been protected. In all honesty, this was probably the largest tree in Springvale, was being the operative word. Please help keep what we cannot replace. Mr Thorley. Mr Mayor.
Mr Thorley.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Thank you for the question, Mr Parsons. Council officers agree that it's very disappointing that the owner of this site has chosen to remove this tree. I can confirm that Council has been pursuing avenues to prevent the removal of this tree, including recently refusing an application to extend the planning permit for a redevelopment of this site. Unfortunately, while the development itself requires a planning permit, the removal of the tree alone did not require a planning permit or another permit for its removal, and as such, the tree has not been illegally removed. Tree removal on private land still remains a significant issue for many local councils continuing to look for solutions. Greater Dandenong City Council is currently in the process of developing a draft local law to protect significant trees on private land, and this will be brought to a future council briefing session for consideration. If the local law is implemented, it will hopefully prevent the future removal of any significant trees within our city. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Thorley. Councillors, we move on to item 4, Officers' Reports, Part 2, 4.1, Contracts, 4.1.1, Contract number 2122.34, Fencing, Supply, Installation and Repairs. Moved by Councillor Garrard, second by Councillor Lim. Are there any questions? Is there any opposition? If there is no opposition, I declare the motion carried. Item 4.1.2, Contract number 2122.42, Graffiti Removal and Application of Protective Coatings. Moved by Councillor Lim, second by Councillor Formosa. Are there any questions? Is there any opposition? If there is no opposition, I declare the motion carried. Item 4.2 Other, 4.2.1 Audit and Risk Committee Self-Assessment. Moved by Councillor Garrard. Second by Deputy Mayor Foster. Are there any questions? Is there any opposition? If there is no opposition, I declare the motion carried. Councillor Garrard.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to point out the very high level of confidence that was shown in the Audit and Risk Committee by the survey that was undertaken among the council and councillors, and to point out the important work that the Audit and Risk Committee has done in ensuring protection against fraud and other issues around integrity. And I wish to commend the members of the Audit and Risk Committee.
Thank you, Councillor Garrard. Item 4.2.3, list of registered correspondence to the Mayor and Councillors. Yeah, I'm getting there. I've got one of these on there. Item 4.2.2, Lonsdale Street parking meters, recommencement of fees. Moved by Councillor O'Reilly, second by Councillor Garrard. Are there any questions? Is there any opposition? If there is no opposition, I declare the motion carried.
Mayor, can I comment?
Councillor Garrard.
Mayor, thank you. I'd just like to comment that what we have actually voted for tonight is to reinstate the parking meters, but that there'll be ongoing consultation with the business community to look at what the pricing will be.
Thank you, Councillor Garrard. Councillor O'Reilly.
Thank you, Mayor. Council has tried free parking and assessed the pros and cons, received feedback from traders that when you make something free, it can get used and misused, whereas a token cost of a small parking fee then is more likely to be used by actual shoppers rather than sometimes traders using the parking for their own purpose. So I think Council will continue to monitor the parking situation. We have the automated parking detectors in place. We can use the data from that and make sure that primarily what we're seeking to do is support readily available customer parking for local traders. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor O'Reilly. We'll move on to the next item, 4.2.3, list of registered correspondence to Mayor and Councillors.
Happy to move.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Foster, second by Councillor Garrard. Are there any questions?
Yes,
Deputy Mayor Foster.
I just would like to know if we've responded to in regards to the letter of complaint from a trader regarding the state of the laneway that runs parallel to Ian Street in Noble Park. Can the relevant council officer indicate whether we've responded?
Mr Van Boxtel.
Through the Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Foster, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, I can confirm that I had a meeting with Amby from the solicitors about 2.5 weeks ago now. And yeah, we've discussed the 4 main concerns that have been raised, and we've actioned the things that we can immediately action. So we've ramped up our litter collection in that location. We've arranged for some cleaning of the drains in the laneway to improve the drainage in that area. There were some concerns about flooding. We're still investigating some of the other matters that have been raised. The local traders there are seeking some improvements to public lighting, which we need to investigate further because it abuts a residential area and there's some sensitivities around how lighting may operate within that space, and also how it might be funded if we are able to do something. So we're currently working through those issues, and yeah, I've confirmed with Amby that the solicitor involved that will be providing a formal response in writing shortly to all of the matters raised in his correspondence. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Van Boxtel. Are there any further questions? Is there any opposition? If there is no opposition, I declare the motion carried. Item 5, notice of motion, 5.1, notice of motion number 19, council support and advocacy for Sri Lanka. Moved by Councillor Garrard.
Happy to second.
Second by Deputy Mayor Foster. Are there any questions? Is there any opposition?
Indicate opposition, Mayor.
Councillor Dark in opposition. Councillor Garrard.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to acknowledge the members of the Sri Lankan community here tonight in support of this motion. As you're aware, as all of us are aware, right now the situation in Sri Lanka is dire and getting worse by the day. The country of 22 million people is suffering from crippling foreign debt, record inflation of up to 40%, fuel shortages preventing travel to work and education, lack of funds to pay government wages and the near collapse of the health system. Whilst the World Bank is providing short-term funds, the situation is likely to worsen due to the fundamental instability of the economy. The peak body for Australian aid organisations and humanitarian agencies is calling on the Australian government to urgently boost humanitarian support to Sri Lanka to help address this looming economic crisis. The ACFID, the Australian Council for International Development, has called on Australia to provide $10 million in immediate funds to Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka and Australia have a long history of cooperation in trade and investment, education support, culture and development. The two countries recently celebrated 75 years of diplomatic relations, engaging in a wide range of issues, from cooperation on economic security and development priorities to human rights and reconciliation. Assisting Sri Lanka is consistent also with Australian strategic aims in the region. The city of Greater Dandenong has a large Sri Lankan diaspora with over 6,000 residents who have made an important contribution to our community. Many of this community are now in distress, having to financially support at a greater level their family members back in Sri Lanka. Do you want to read the actual motion or...?
We don't need to.
Yeah.
It's already...
So I would greatly urge our councillors to support Sri Lanka at this time of need, to support our community, who are obviously in great distress at this time.
Thank you, Councillor Garrard. Deputy Mayor Foster.
Thank you, Mayor. I mean, I can't add much more to what Councillor Garrard has said in terms of the importance of this notice of motion. We do have quite a number of Sri Lankan residents in our community. I know in my own ward, in the Yarraman ward, there are quite a number as well. I'm good friends with a number of Sri Lankans who have concerns about family in Sri Lanka. It is in a state of distress, and as Councillor Garrett has said, it is only getting worse. Only in the news just this weekend, it's deteriorated further. And I think this notice of motion is about showing support for our Sri Lankan residents, and we have a few here today in the gallery, who are suffering because they see their family are suffering. There are queues for fuel, there are queues for medication, there are queues for food. There's food shortages, fuel shortages, there's power cuts. I mean, if we think of ourselves living in those circumstances, we would be distraught. And the least that we can do is to just urge the federal government to perhaps do a little bit more. We can voice our concerns on behalf of our residents. I don't think that's much to ask for. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Foster. Councillor Dark in opposition.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, I rise in opposition to this item and this motion on a couple of matters. And for the record, look, there's no question there is a very difficult time in Sri Lanka at the moment. I myself have attended Sri Lanka, and I'm aware, Mayor, you have attended yourself, and I've attended on behalf of an invitation of the Sri Lankan government. The end of the day, the issue that I'm having with this particularly is the way in which the wording is in this notice of motion. Now, this council is something, and certainly I'm proud of, is supporting people and supporting groups when there's been crises, when there's been tsunamis, when there's been huge events, and they've required a level of injection. I have an issue when I find a motion that's been worded the way that this one has been worded is loaded, and I find it to be loaded in the way that it actually doesn't go to actually specifically tie us to any commitment or to any support. Rather, it tells, basically, it states word for word that we write to the Federal Minister for Immigration requesting that we grant Sri Lankans humanitarian refugee status immediately above the annual quota. But it doesn't give any terms of how many or what we're looking at, and this could easily be interpreted as much as there's no fuel in Sri Lanka and therefore you can apply for a visa and come to Australia. There needs to be certain clarification points on this wording of a notice of motion in order for me to support it. The second is that sending Sri Lankans back to a country at this time to face certain harm. Well, there may be, I believe, as Councillor Garrett has mentioned, over 20 million people residing there, but the definition of certain harm is open to interpretation. Now, whilst there may be issues with fuel, there is an injection from the Australian government. I believe the Albanese government has committed a significant amount of money, I believe in the tune of 50 to 100 million in support of that. And that has been provided. And then item 2.3, that provides Australian humanitarian aid to Sri Lanka, being direct humanitarian aid at the request of the ACFID, but doesn't exactly go to stipulate what direct material aid that this council is supposed to be supporting. And I have an issue that it leaves it very, very, very grey area into what we would support. Now, if this motion had stated that we would give, as our standard policy is, $10,000 to the United Nations World Food Appeal, to any of the other groups, 100% I would support it. But I have an issue supporting one which is less about actually directly helping the people that are there and providing an instant capital injection of funds, and more about whether they should or shouldn't be deported and or shouldn't be given a refugee visa to come to Australia. And that is a reason that I, at this stage, will not be supporting this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Dark. Are there any further speakers? Councillor O'Reilly.
Thank you. Now, I think the motion should be taken in the context of that it's expressing the will of council, and we as a council are not mandating a specific parameters and measurements to the federal government as to what they should do. It should be taken as this council fully understands and supports the plight of some Sri Lankans, and we stand behind them, and we want things to be done generally as we have expressed in the motion. So I think we shouldn't get caught up in the detail on it, but take it as read and really express the will of the council. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor O'Reilly. Any further speakers? Right of reply, Councillor Garrard.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Dark, for raising your concerns, and I'm very happy to speak to them. The issue of the $10 million we are requesting is part of a United Nations call for $47 million, and $10 million is our portion, and other countries will make up the $47 million. And the reason this is important, and the reason it is over and above the $100 million the Australian government has promised, is because that $100 million is going for border protection and is going not to the people directly, but this humanitarian, so this is going through the NGO network, is going directly to the people, directly for food, material aid and health support. And this is what the now 5 million people who are at food security risk right now, this is what will keep them alive. This is critical right now at this moment to keep those 5 million people alive. Ultimately, 22 million in this country will be food insecure as this economic crisis worsens and the situation gets worse. What we want right now is that the children that will not eat today and the families that will not have food on their table this week will have food and material aid immediately. In Dandenong, we are a microcosm of the whole world. When there is pain in a country such as Sri Lanka, where so many of our residents come from, we feel that pain. This notice of motion is saying that we should acknowledge what is happening there, show allegiance with our community who are under duress because of the situation that is happening there, and that we should write to the federal government and use what persuasive power we have to encourage them to put food into the bellies of those children today who are starving and at risk of dying of starvation. This is a critically important notice of motion. In terms of asking that we provide permanent residency for the Sri Lankan people who are here now, that can be sent back to Sri Lanka because the government does not recognise that there is a crisis there. Those people should not be sent back. It should be recognised that it is not safe for them to return, and they should be given permanent residency here in the first instance. In terms of being over the quota, we did this for the Afghanistan crisis situation. We asked the government to go over quota because this is an immediate crisis and it needs immediate response from the federal government. And it is right and proper that Dandenong, which has such a multicultural community, writes to the federal government and asks for them to deal with this issue. And I think that I have actually addressed all of the issues that Councillor Dark raised. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garrard. All councillors in favour of the motion, please raise your hand. Councillor O'Reilly, Deputy Mayor Foster, Councillor Garrard, Councillor Mametti, Councillor Lim, Councillor Formoso and Councillor Tan. All those against, Councillor Dark and Councillor Milkovich. The motion is carried. Item 6, reports from councillors, delegated members and councillor questions. Councillor Tan.
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, just got some questions regarding to the CIP projects. The first one through you, Mayor, through the relevant officer, just regarding to the 2A Frank Street Noble Park open space. I know that we are expected to start the construction work, which is commenced this month in July and to be completed by September. Is that still the case? Thanks.
Mr Van Boxtel.
Through the Mayor, thank you, Councillor Tan, for your question. Yes, my understanding is that's still the case, that works will commence this month. A contractor has been appointed and that works are due for completion by September, late September of this year.
Thank you, Mr Van Boxtel. Councillor Tan.
Yep, and the other one just regarding to NPAC Wellbeing Gymnasiums. Do you have any update on this yet? Thanks.
Mr Van Boxtel.
The Mayor, thank you, Councillor Tan. Sorry, I don't have an update on NPAC. I'll need to take that question on notice and get back to you.
Thank you, Mr Van Boxtel. Councillor Tan.
And last one, just regarding to the 20 million that federal government given us in regarding to the Dandenong Wellbeing Gymnasium, which is gymnasium plus the Dandenong swimming pool. So part of it, which is around 5 million to be allocated to NPAC stage 2. Just wondering when the project will be conducted again throughout the process with consultation. Thanks.
The $20 million, how much? And 5 million for the Noble Park. Yeah. Just to clarify, Councillor Tan, are you asking for the Dandenong Oasis, the Wellbeing Centre,
So
or the
part of
NPAC part of it?
Yeah, so part of the federal grant,
Yeah,
which is 5 million, will be given to the NPAC stage 2 projects.
Yep.
So, you know, when
is your question about NPAC, is it?
NPACs, yeah.
So
stage 2.
that contribution of the federal government of 5 million to NPAC,
yeah.
when will you start that project? That's the question. Mr Benny?
Well, for a start, I think it was 16.4, not 15.5.
Trying to take an extra million.
That's probably beside the point. And the short answer is that we haven't yet pursued. We've got the commitment from the federal government that if elected, which they have been, that grant would be upheld. We haven't pursued that yet. We think it's only fair and reasonable that they find their feet and settle in, and we will be pursuing that. But the $4 million that would go towards NPAC, our focus at the moment is on the Dandenong Wellbeing Centre and getting that project up and going, and we've got a lot more work to do on NPAC before we can direct $4 million, which will be minimal in the scheme of things for the NPAC end. So perhaps I should just say significant work in progress. We're grateful for the allocation. We've got more work to do at the state level to try and get matching, if not greater, grants from the state government. And then council, the state and the federal government will need to sort of come together to confirm how we can make both projects work.
Thank you, Mr Benny. Councillor Tan?
That's all, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Tan. Councillor Formoso?
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I'd like to thank my fellow colleagues that allowed me some personal leave to look after my son who was diagnosed with leukemia. Sorry, I thought I wasn't going to cry. Obviously, it's a very, very difficult time for Luca and my family. So I'd personally like to thank all of the community and obviously council and my fellow councillors that have supported us through this journey, and in particular those of you that attended the walk with us in May. And I'd like to announce that the final figure that Team Lucasade raised for Monash Health Foundation was $72,042.60. So that was a huge effort from us and all of the community and everyone that attended. So thank you to everybody that donated and for their continued support through this difficult and long journey for us. Which brings me to my second point and question. Whilst in hospital, we had to have several blood transfusions, and we discovered that there was a huge shortage of blood. Mainly the reason being COVID. A lot of people had stopped donating blood. And during this process, I discovered that the closest location for Greater Dandenong residents was Glen Waverley for them to donate blood. However, we did have a pop-up donor centre here at St Mary's Community Centre in Dandenong, July 4th to July 8th, which was fantastic. However, it wasn't well advertised. I don't think many of our residents knew about it. So what I would ask, Mayor, if we could organise perhaps the Life Blood Bank to come to council office and for us to have a donate as a group, not only as councillors but council staff and perhaps the general public, because like I said, there is a shortage and a great need for it. A new blood donor is needed every 4 minutes, and at least 1 in 3 people will need blood at some stage. So things that I'd never really thought about until I had to, and it's a scary thought, and it's something that we can all contribute to assist not only our residents but obviously anybody that's in need of blood within our state. It's all very safe. We've got some of the best facilities and safest methods of doing that. So I would highly urge us as a council, Mayor, if we could possibly organise the lifeblood to come to council. So that was my first question, comment. And in relation to that, I actually went to watch my son play his under-9 soccer match, my younger son. Obviously, my older son won't be playing for quite some time. And I couldn't help but notice the amount of smoking that was taking place at the pavilions. The one that I attended happened to be a high school as well. And the most distressing part about that was that I actually had Luca with me at the time, who we all had our masks on, obviously, and we were outside, so we thought it would be a safe space for us to come and watch and cheer on his younger brother. However, there were several parents there with their own children smoking at the venue, and when I asked them kindly to step away from the premises to have their cigarette, they became quite defensive and aggressive and told me that there weren't any signs to stipulate the fact that smoking shouldn't occur at these pavilions. So my question is, if we could please remind the clubs once again throughout our municipality the importance of not smoking at our sporting venues at any point. It's a state health issue. It's a law, and I was really perplexed at the fact that I needed to stipulate this to a number of parents. And that also brings me to a disturbing fact, which is that 20% of Greater Dandenong residents are smokers compared to 16% across Victoria. So we have not only the highest smokers in our state, on top of the fact that we're the least active. So these are some really, really scary stats that we need to be addressing immediately. So my question, Mayor, would be if the appropriate officer could please send letters to sporting clubs, once again reminding them of the no smoking rule, not to mention the amount of cigarette butts that I'm constantly finding at these locations as well, please. Thank you.
Mr. Devine.
Through you, Mr Mayor, on the first point regarding the blood bank, I was aware it was in Dandenong last week, but we'll certainly do some further advocacy there, Councillor Formoso, in a bid to get them to the Civic Centre. On the second point, we regularly write to our sporting clubs about their conditions of occupancy and smoking, but we will again raise that with our clubs and look at the signage issue. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Devine. Councillor Formoso.
Thanks, Mr Devine. Clearly that isn't working, so I'm really urging us as a council to start doing a little bit more about this, perhaps even enforcing some infringements at these clubs. I have personal photo and video evidence of this occurring on the day, amongst other occasions. So I really do urge that we start addressing this issue. It's a health crisis issue, and it's obviously a really, really bad example that we're setting for our already health suffering municipality. So my third point is another issue that obviously I've been dealing with on for a long time now, it seems, which is the hooning. And so I would urge us as a council to please advertise the fact that there is now a hooning reference group that the state government has organised on behalf of the hooning issues that are occurring in several municipalities, ours being one of them. So City of Casey will be hosting one of these reference groups for community members to attend, which will be on the 27th of July between 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. I'll be attending online, but I do urge anyone in the municipality that's having issues and concerns about hooning, this will be the platform for them to voice those issues and concerns. And I would really urge our council as well to support this event taking place.
Mr. Van Boxtel.
Through the Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Formoso. We'll take that on board. We'll liaise with our media and communications team regarding promoting that particular opportunity, and we'll liaise further also with our transport team to ensure that we're engaged in that process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Van Boxtel. Councillor Formoso.
Thanks, Mr. Van Boxtel. That'd be great. Appreciate that. The final point and comment that I'd like to make is that I'm very, very pleased to see that Southeast Leisure has come on board as of the 1st of July, and I believe that the transition has been pretty much flawless. I'm really excited about being part of an amazing group of people who are going to create incredible outcomes for our municipality, one that we deserve and one that's been long overdue. So I welcome Southeast Leisure and commend them on the takeover from the 1st of July and wish them all the very best of luck. And I really look forward to working closely with them for us to get those health outcomes that we deserve. That's all from me, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Formoso. Councillor Milkovich.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of questions tonight. Could we get an update on the lux test that was done, or actually potential installation of the streetlights in regards to Carlton Road community shops, and I think it's 105 Carlton Road. I understand there was a lux test done. One of the residents complained about the low visibility at night, and it was established that it's not quite sufficient, but there's some sort of an issue with where the lampposts can be installed, if at all. So could we get an update? If not tonight, maybe at some stage.
Mr. Van Boxtel.
Through the Mayor, Councillor Milkovic. I'll follow that up with our relevant area of council to see if that test has been completed and what the results were and what action we're taking, and I'll get back in contact with you.
Thank you, Mr Van Boxtel. Councillor Milkovich.
Thank you, Mr. Van Boxtel. Just an update. The test has been conducted and it was established that the lux was not sufficient or whatever, but because of the position of the shops and surrounding streets and houses, there was nowhere to sort of install the sign, not install the lamppost, but it was, I think Mr. Berry told me that they're going to look into if and when it can be done. So just an update on that maybe. Thank you. Second one, could we also get an update on possible, or if not possible, but as soon as possible, installation of some signage on a boardwalk at the Hetcham Park, the one that's been cordoned off for almost a year now because there were some major structural defects that were discovered at a later stage of the preliminary investigation that I think that can't be just fixed. So residents keep asking the question if and when something is going to be done. Thank you.
Mr Van Boxtel.
Through the Mayor, thank you, Councillor Milkovich. I'll follow up on the signage issue and make sure the appropriate signage is installed at that location. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Van Boxtel.
Thank you, Mr Van
Councillor
Boxtel.
Milkovich.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And lastly, I would also like to congratulate South East Leisure on taking over Dandenong Basketball Stadium for what I understand, Dandenong Oasis, Novel Park, Aquatic Centre and a couple other facilities. I've got to say the parents, the visitors, which I'm one of, are absolutely delighted at the fact that there's no more penny pinching $3 entry fee to Dandenong Basketball Stadium. Now parents can come with their grandparents, with their relatives, cousins, and enjoy watching their kids play sports. And people have actually commented quite positively to the fact that this has been one of the hassles that they had to constantly find change, or they forgot their wallet or whatever, they got to go back home and just drop the kids off. We want as many people to play, or as many kids to play sports. We want their younger siblings to watch them, join in the action as well. We also want to be able to, for their parents, grandparents and relatives and cousins and everyone else and friends as well, to join in the action. And so thank you, South East Leisure. This is a fantastic outcome, at least for Dandenong Basketball Stadium. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Milkovich. Councillor Dark.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, my first question this evening has come in from a resident who lives on the corner of Chandler and Parkmore Street in Kingsborough, number 397. Now, on the side of the Parkmore Road, there was an old watch light, an old gas light that overlooked the street. It provided lighting, particularly for a very dark spot in the middle of the street. Crews were recently out there where that light has since been taken off. The resident went out and spoke to the crew that was taking down light, which I said, due to some issues with the emissions and the way that the gas heats up and that, and the emissions with it, they're removing it. But there was no conversation about it being replaced with any sort of even LED variant or anything to light it up. I'll pass on some correspondence, but if we could please have a look and see with the relevant director what opportunities we have for replacing it with an additional light on the pole, so that once again there's not this very, very dark spot that is in the middle of the street.
Mr Van Boxtel.
Through the Mayor, thank you, Councillor Dark. If you could forward on the details, we'll definitely follow up with United Energy and find out why the light was removed and whether a replacement is proposed, and if not, what we can do to try and see if we can get a replacement delivered at that location. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Van Boxtel. Councillor Dark.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, my next question is with regards to the Alan Corrigan Reserve upgrades, which have now formally opened. And I went down there on the weekend to see that the park is well and truly open now. It looks fantastic. I was wondering whether it'd be possible for the media communications team or council to put out some correspondence alerting residents nearby that the park is now open after all of the improvements. It has been, I know, delayed with a lot of the wet weather and getting the contractors on site, but it would be good just to promote a brand new upgrade to a reserve.
Ms Pratt.
Through you, Mr Mayor, yes, we'd be happy to promote that. Absolutely.
Thank you, Ms Pratt. Councillor Dark.
Thank you, Mayor. My next question is some correspondence I received from the Southern Football Netball League with regards to the electronic scoreboard at the Raleigh Island Reserve. I've raised it multiple times in the past, and I'm aware that the club actually had one of their players who was a licensed Sparky go up and actually adjust it to get the scoreboard working. There was an incident once again on this weekend in which case the scoreboard failed to activate, or did activate at the start and then went dark, and it caused a lot of issues for the play of the football match, in that the refs or umpires were looking around trying to find out where the scoreboard was up to. It would go on and off incrementally and then would have incorrect numbers. as I said, it has been going on for a very, very, very long time now. And I think now that we're receiving correspondence from the umpires and people who are trying to run a game about the stresses and issues with it, whether we could actually have a look at, one, potentially getting an external auditor or somebody to have a look and see exactly where the issues are, and two, if we could have a conversation with the clubs to determine exactly at what stage and when it is going on, because I know the contractors, I believe it was Campaign, went out there, nobody consulted with the football club, and there was confusion about exactly what was being done, but I think now it is becoming quite a pressing issue.
Mr. Devine?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I am aware of issues with the scoreboard at that reserve in past years. I'm not aware of the most recent ones, but we will take that up as a priority.
Thank you, Mr Devine. Councillor Dark.
Thank you, Mayor. My final question this evening, I've had a couple of emails and Facebook messages as well from a couple of residents on Northgate Drive and Teddy Crescent, particularly given that the development has started of the old Kingsborough High School site with the townhouse development there. The residents on Northgate and Teddy Crescent had been under the assumption that where Teddy Crescent is eventually had actually been closed off and there had been forecast to be turned into a reserve. That's subsequently not the case with the final design, and a lot of residents actually have been told recently with heavy earthwork machinery being dropped off that this is actually going to become quite a major thoroughfare for access onto the street. I've had both neighbours on Teddy Crescent reach out to me and also several on Northgate Drive. If we could please do some sort of letterbox drop or a mail out informing them that the construction has started and potentially providing a rough drawing or diagram of what is scheduled or planned with the outline reserve going into Teddy Crescent, that would be great.
Mr Thorley.
Through you, Mr Mayor, thank you for the question, Councillor Dark. We're happy to take that on notice and see what we can do to widely distribute information on the approved development there.
Thank you, Mr Thorley. Councillor Dark.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, I just had one final question that just occurred to me. I forgot to ask the last council meeting. The state government has announced that they are providing a moratorium through the media release on council pursuing the debt of outstanding debt that we have in terms of our debtors of people with council rates. I know that the council for a very long time has a substantial amount of arrears in terms of people's failure to pay. I just want to find out from the relevant officer what the potential forecasting, if we've done any modelling, would be on council's bottom line and on our debt levels if the proposed amendments were to go through.
Ms Hanson.
Thanks. Through you, Mayor. I'll take that on notice. We're actually wrapping up 30th of June results at the moment, so we'll see what the impact of outstanding debts are, but that's given the local government rates and amendment bill, that will have further impacts on that modelling. But I can't give you a direct answer at this point. That's more a timely thing, Councillor Dark.
Thank you, Ms Hanson. Councillor Dark. Thank you, Councillor Dark. Councillor Lim.
Thank you, Mayor. Just first of all, I'd like to thank to our council and also state government by providing a school holiday program the last 2 weeks, especially at Springwell Activity Centre and also right across our municipality. It was a very successful one. On the 6th of July, on Wednesday, Mayor Jim Mameti, myself and Deputy Mayor Eden Foster attended the Citizenship Ceremony with 230 new citizens. And also on the 8th of July, I attended what we call the Springwell Italian Senior Citizen Club for the first anniversary celebration. And also, I'd just like to follow up my question is many weeks ago, I raised the issue about multi-level car park. Since May 2022, there's some renovation happened from early of May, and since then haven't had any progress whatsoever. Just like the relevant officer to give me some idea, because so far I haven't heard anything from that at all. Thank you.
Mr Van Boxtel.
Through the Mayor, thank you, Councillor Lim. The multi-deck car park at number 8 is being done in 3 stages. My understanding is we've completed stages 1 and 2 of the works. The third stage is the actual construction of the new ramp improvements. The concreting contractor was recently appointed to undertake that work. I don't actually have a program that I can share with you this evening in terms of when they starting and how long it will take, but I'll get that information to you shortly. But we can assure you that that final phase is imminent and will be undertaken shortly.
Thank you, Mr Van Boxtel. Councillor Lim.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Van Boxtel. That's all from me. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Lim. Councillor Garrard.
Thank you, Mayor. Firstly, I just want to thank the residents that turned up on the weekend for the extensive native planting that took place. We covered a lot of ground, and I want to thank the Parks team for their guidance and expertise in guiding us in how to do that. Just a reminder that we're going to start our nature strip native planting soon, and so if people want their nature strip planted with native plants, we have a team of volunteers, and we're willing to go around to people's houses and assist them in planting out their nature strips, because we know that that will increase biodiversity, and we know that that's going to be good for our environment. Mr Mayor, the Get Up, Stand Up, Show Up theme this week for NAIDOC week that has just ended. It was tremendous to see the turn up at the number of NAIDOC events that were held by the council, and even the mayor tried rap dancing, hip-hop dancing at one of the events. It was pretty good, actually, and he got the seal of approval from the kids there. It's a great privilege to play our part as an ally and to continue to implement our reconciliation action plan. Through you, Mayor, my first question. Increasingly, new developments have narrow streets and make on-street parking difficult. Many residents in Kingsborough South have been fined for two wheels up parking on nature strips. This is causing distress among residents who have no option but to park on the street. In a previous meeting, the officer stated that streets can apply for exemption to allow for two-wheel-up parking. Can the relevant officer outline the process of application for an exemption?
Mr Thorley.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Thanks for the question, Councillor Garrard. In general, the best way to request an exemption or put forward an application is to contact Council's transport engineers to discuss a particular street. And that's to email either through council@cgd.vic.gov.au or to our road safety at CGD. I can give you these details, obviously, following this meeting. I would also like to note that residents seeking to do this should take into consideration the narrow streets document on our website as a first step. Typically, two wheels up will only be supported on streets that are narrower than 6.6 metres and greater than 5.5 metres, so it doesn't leave a lot of room for flexibility there. Our engineers are also need to make sure that any assets are appropriately protected and visibility issues are not created through this exemption. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Thorley. Councillor Garrard.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a follow-up question. Does the whole street have to apply, or can individuals apply?
Mr Thorley.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I believe portions of the street can be taken into consideration depending on how the application is lodged and through the negotiations with our engineers.
Thank you, Mr Thorley. Councillor Garrard.
Thank you, Mayor. In another traffic issue, with a large volume of traffic on Perry Road in Kingsborough South, including a number of trucks travelling to the industrial zone, there's a greater risk of pedestrian traffic trying to cross the road being at risk. There has been some concerning near incidents in recent weeks. As we do not have the funds for a pedestrian crossing, I've had discussions with state representatives who have indicated there may be funds available. Can we formally write to MPs Martin Bakula and Tim Richardson requesting consideration to fund a pedestrian crossing in the Perry Road site, providing also our current plans for one?
Mr Van Boxtel.
Councillor Garrard, through the Mayor, we can write a letter under the Mayor's signature to the Members of Parliament as requested and make sure that all relevant details regarding this request are provided and therefore considered. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Van Boxtel. Councillor Garrard.
Thank you, Mayor. My next question is to the relevant officer. Can you please explain the removal of a light pole on the corner of Perry and Church Road in Kingsborough South?
Mr Van Boxtel.
Through the Mayor, thank you, Councillor Garrard. We have recently been advised by United Energy that the pole was impacted by an unknown party and removed for safety reasons. I can confirm that United Energy have a request to replace the pole in their system, and we have been advised that this should take place around mid-August. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Van Boxtel. Councillor Garrett.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, the last annual sustainability report was for the 2018-19 financial year. A few months back, I asked a question at the council meeting, was told that there would be catch-up reports for the 2019-20 and 2020-21 financial years coming to the council meeting in July. What is the status and timeframes for these reports now coming to the council meeting?
Mr Thorley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Garrard, in response to your question, the sustainability team are currently balancing a number of high priority matters at the moment, which has seen a delay in finalising these reports. However, I can advise you that the data is continuing to be collected for these reports, and it is intended that they will be tabled in the next few months once all of the information is able to be collected and compiled into one succinct report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Thorley. Councillor Garrard.
Thank you, Mayor. Has the development of the successor plan to the Greater Dandenong People Seeking Asylum and Refugee Action Plan 2018-21 begun yet? And if not, why not?
Mr Devine.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Councillor. The development of the successor plan for the Greater Dandenong People Seeking Asylum and Refugee Action Plan 2018-21 has begun. It was discussed at the last meeting of the Multicultural and People Seeking Asylum Advisory Committee, meeting that was held in June. The council officers presented the committee with a revised thematic plan in line with the feedback that's been received in earlier meetings. Some final recommendations were made by the group, with council officers now implementing those recommendations into the final plan, which is to be shared at the committee meeting on the 2nd of August. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Devine. Councillor Garrard.
Thank you, Mayor. What is the status of the procurement of the Greater Dandenong Mobile Environment Centre?
Mr Thorley.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Garrard, the proposed Mobile Environment Centre was put out to tender in February 2022. Unfortunately, no responses were received from businesses to potentially construct the centre. As such, a further restricted tender, which will directly target certain businesses, is taking place. This restricted tender commenced on the 7th of July and will conclude on the 2nd of August. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Thorley. Councillor Garrard.
Thank you, Mayor. My final question is a question without notice, just regarding our advocacy plan for the state election. Where is that at, and when can we expect to see that?
Ms Sprague.
Thank you, Councillor Garrard. Through you, Mr Mayor. We have been discussing that at an executive level. A lot of the issues will be similar to what we did for the federal advocacy, with a couple of additions. So we are working through that and should have it ready to present to councillors in the next couple of weeks.
Thank you, Ms Sprague.
Thank you,
Councillor
Mayor.
Garrard. Thank you. Deputy Mayor Foster.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess since the last meeting, I unfortunately did come down with COVID, so I was absent, and so COVID brain probably got me with that passing an item I probably shouldn't have passed. But on that note, I probably would like to take the opportunity to remind our residents that unfortunately COVID is still with us, and I do highly recommend our residents get their fourth dose, and we know that the fourth dose has been expanded in terms of recommendation for 50-year-olds and is available to 30-year-olds plus as well. So when my time is eligible, I'll probably look at getting that fourth dose. You know, it does protect us. I know that for myself, I bounce back pretty quickly, apart from the COVID foggy brain that I demonstrated this evening. I'd also like to just mention a couple of events that I did attend. It would have been more, but again, isolation limited that. So on the 6th of July, I did attend the Citizenship Ceremony with yourself, Mayor, and Councillor Lim and Councillor Loy. It's so good to see 230 new Australians become citizens, well, new residents or residents become new Australians. Again, COVID brain. But again, it's highlights our diversity in our municipality, and something that I think we're all quite proud of. I also had the privilege of hosting the flag-raising ceremony on behalf of the City of Greater Dandenong for our Argentinian community, not just here in the City of Greater Dandenong, but we were visited by a number of Argentinians from around Melbourne, and we were lucky to have the Consul General of the Argentine Republic, Silvina Aguirre, present as well. So it was very lovely to share that with her and the community. And finally, I'd just like to wish our Muslim brothers and sisters, don't know how to wish, but a happy Eid, and wish them prosperity and joy for this time. So thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Foster. Councillor O'Reilly.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had one issue's been brought up by a resident to me on Facebook Messenger. Just so everyone knows, I take queries on phone, email, website, Facebook. I don't mind where they come from. I will respond and take up their cause to the best of my ability, Mayor. But this resident lives adjacent to Springvale Reserve. On Springvale Reserve there is a long concrete-based spectator stand. It's not the heritage one, it's the one that runs alongside Harris Street. I've seen it a while back, and according to this resident, there's a couple of issues. Firstly, the base of the stand, the concrete base, is broken and crumbling. Sounds pretty bad. And secondly, there are instances of public urination at the back of the stand. Now, you know, similar to what Councillor Formoso raised regarding public smoking. I understand these things are quite difficult for council to enforce, but if the relevant officer could have the stand's condition inspected and any essential works on the stand be considered. Mayor, thank you.
Mr Van Boxtel.
Through the Mayor, thank you, Councillor O'Reilly. We'll arrange for an inspection of the concrete matter at the location as soon as possible and ensure that it's safe, and if it's not, we'll take corrective action to ensure that the public is not at risk, and I'll liaise with the relevant parts of council regarding the second matter that you raised. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Van Boxtel. Councillor O'Reilly. Thank you. Councillors, I had the pleasure to attend the Noble Park Public Hall and Mills Reserve interpretive sign launch last week. I also attended the Amari Accountants. It's a new accountant office in Dandenong, which I officially opened. I also had a meeting with His Excellency, Mr Waidullah Waisay, the Ambassador in Exile of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. And I took him down Lonsdale Street and we actually had a aga juice. So I recommend if you haven't been to Lonsdale Street, aga juice makes some really nice smoothies. Councillors, we also, like Councillor Garrard said, on Sunday the 3rd at Dandenong Market, we celebrated NODOC Week celebration. And yes, I was dancing and trying to do some rap, but Councillor Garrard was also jumping up and down and also State Member Lee Talamas also was in the groove as well. So I'm not sure if there's any video of that, but anyway, it was a cold morning and it was a good way to get warm. As a couple of other councillors touched on, Citizenship Ceremony, 230 new citizens, always a pleasure to hand over the citizenship on the citizenship ceremonies, and it was great to have 3 councillors accompany on that evening. I also had a meeting with the Consul General of the Argentine Republic, Ms. Silvana Oguri, who visited me on Friday and also came back to Dandenong on the second day, being Argentine's Independence Day on 9th of July, which there was a flag-raising ceremony which Deputy Mayor Foster officiated. I also attended a meeting with the Afghan community, requesting a meeting held with Julian Hill and also Lee Talamas and myself. It was more of a federal issue. They wanted to know how the current government is going with the applications, temporary protection visas and etc. And Mr. Hill was happy to take lots of those questions on notice and get back to the community later on in August or early September once the federal parliament has actually got together and had their first sitting and will be able to have more answers. I also attended the Afghan Youth Association Eid celebration, a great organisation who are really supporting their youth, and it was great to enjoy their Eid with them as well. And today, myself and Mr. Benny, with a couple of directors, hosted a lunch with the Afghan business community who are doing really, really well in Dandenong, especially Thomas Street. Now you can see many new shops opening up in Lonzar Street, and the community is growing bigger, better and stronger, and it was good to be able to have a chat there with them over lunch and discuss the way moving forward and helping new businesses establish as well. As Councillor Deputy Mayor Foster said, Eid was on Saturday. I'd like to wish all our community who celebrated Eid Mubarak, and I wish them all the very, very best for the coming year. Mr. Benny, you've got some questions taken on notice at the last council meeting?
Yes, Mayor, there are 11 councillor questions taken on notice at the last meeting. They've all been answered and will be included in the minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Benny. Item 7, urgent business. If there's no urgent business, I declare the meeting closed at 8:31 p.m. Thank you for your attendance.
Mr. Mayor, I'd just like you to know we're going to have a photo taken with the Sri Lankan community. Any councillor that wants to be part of that photo, most welcome.
Aiden